useful to us afterwards. Welcome everyone to the VisualSP monthly customer roundtable. This is a roundtable discussion for our customers about strategies and trends and requirements and challenges and things like that that face a wide range of industries. So we talk with experts on different topics that affect all of us. And in this new format, we're publishing the episodes to our YouTube channel, which makes them available for even a larger audience, perhaps others from the conference or wishing they could have been from the conference this week. So this month we're coming live from the exhibit floor at the Power Platform Conference. We'll have Shane Young from Power Apps 911. We also have Jason Gumpert with us from Microsoft. Thank you for joining us. Our topic is that of Power Platform. Before we get into too many details on the topic, though, a shameless plug happens first. We have some things to announce, product features to announce this week that go in very nicely with the Power Platform Conference. We have deeper integration available as of this month with Power Apps, Power BI, and Dynamics Business Central. Those are relevant topics for our customers and for many people at this conference. Just a quick look at what that means. It's now possible for you to do help items within the Power Apps you design. So you notice you'll see there's a help icon here. There's a walkthrough step pointing at things in your forms. This is a big deal. It really allows you to offer that little bit of help, that little bit of guidance to people when they're using your apps and your dashboards. Similarly, we have deeper integration now with Dynamics as well, where we can filter things based on the application and entity, whether it's a help item for a list view or a form view or both, as well as the roles that should have permission to see that item as well. So good stuff that's exciting for people that deal with these platforms and these products and are looking for help in supporting them. Let's jump to our topic of governance, though. As usual, when we have a topic in our roundtable, we start just by talking about the idea, the concept behind it. So we've got a couple of quotes as normal, right? My observation, I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. It's a roundtable. Feel free to join in and participate, whether you are one of our panelists or just one of the attendees. We're happy to hear your voice, especially in this part. So our first quote here is, once a technology rolls over you, if you're not part of the steamroller, you're part of the road. And that one said a lot to me, right? Sometimes we have a tendency to be very conservative with what we let users do in an environment, especially if it's new to us. But in my experience, that can be too far one way. Sometimes it goes the other way where there's no governance on those new things at all, right? But the window doesn't have to be all the way up or all the way down. Usually the best spot is somewhere in the middle. Anybody have any thoughts on that one? Yeah. Jason or Pam or anybody else? No pressure, but it's a quote that said a lot to me personally on this topic. Go ahead and put the second one up here too. Technology is a useful servant, but a dangerous master. So this is kind of the other side of it, right? If you don't do something to control technologies, to govern technologies, they sit in the driver's seat at the end of the day, and they drive many times us and our organization into areas that we wish we hadn't gone. So there is a need for balance when we're talking about governance and best practices, and it's why they have so much value. Every organization picks that balance spot a little bit differently. We're specifically today, we're talking about Power Platform. So let's jump into this. What we have is a list of top 10 items that we want to talk about. Some of these are based on if you're in the audience that is the platform owner for Power Platform. You're the one responsible for creating governance policies and try to encourage adoption, but at the same time, draw some healthy boundaries. Some of our tips, the last 5, are going to be focused more on the builders and talk about best practices for those builders. That's important too, because if you're a builder, you really want to create an environment for yourself where it's easy to be successful and to continue to be successful later. So some structure, some discipline is a good thing. Our first one here is on the governance topic, which is for platform owners. And we had a quote from our little response from our attendees, liking both the quotes that we were talking about. Thank you for that, Carolyn. So our first one here is don't turn it all off. I've seen many organizations that have that tendency. We're not going to use Power Platform at all. We're not going to let our users use any of it. Many times it's because of the fear of the unknown in those places. I think that probably since we're part of the Power Platform conference this week, it's probably a friendlier audience that would likely agree with that. Any thumbs up, thumbs down from anybody? The point here is that no code and low code tools like Power Platform are worth relinquishing some of our control. Yeah, we hear things like that from information security teams. Sometimes it's from the admin team themselves, the ones that do the support, because they don't know how to support it. But there's so much value available in these kind of tools. And without this, people find some other way to do it, right? When we lock everything down, that's how we create shadow IT. We create people just working around us instead of trying to work within the governance boundaries that we have. Or we stifle the adoption of the overall suite. Microsoft 365 offers a lot more valuable, or a lot more value, a lot more ROI when you can use Power Platform in it. So how do you go about doing that? If we go to our governance point number 2, there is this concept of environments in the Power Platform, and it's a really important one for you on governance. Not every organization uses multiple environments, but there's a lot of good to be said about them. They are essentially ways for you to separate things for Power Apps now. Managed environments is something that's out in preview now for Power Apps. We've had environments for some time in Power Automate. So the idea here is it allows you to separate different types of apps and data and things like that. Maybe it's because you want test and production. I've done some collaborative work with a gentleman that does a lot in Power Automate, and that's their primary use in his organization, is to separate dev test and production, separate environments for those so that they can work things through something of a classic dev promotion scheme, through different places, different parts, and different staging areas. Also, you may have some data that's more sensitive than others. When I worked at Visa, we had these different security classifications that we had for all of our data, and different platforms were approved for different levels of sensitivity. And if you have similar situations, you may want to make sure that if somebody makes an app or a flow or something that's accessing data here, that they can't also put that data over here somewhere. That's a good way to illustrate that idea of separating your sensitive data off and keeping it a little more shielded. Or different parts of your organization, maybe different departments, different branches, different parts of the world that have a set of data and apps and reports and dashboards and things all their own. Environments can be a good tool that help you to create these boundaries, as well as set some rules of the road in them. Anybody have any experience using environments? Any feedback they'd like to offer on this one? Good idea, bad idea? No right or wrong answers. An important concept. You'll notice we put a link over here. If you get the material from this after the roundtable, you'll be able to click on them. If not, you can always use the QR code here while we've got the material up and shared. All right, let's go to governance topic number 3. This is a common technique that's used in a lot of organizations, which is just controlling the creation of new flows in Power Automate, new apps in Power Apps or new dashboards. How can you do that? There's multiple ways to go about it. The one that we've linked to over here on the right is just a template flow that you can get in Power Automate that will go if you have admin access in your Power Automate environment or Power Apps environment. If you are an admin in those areas, then this flow can go and find all the new items that have been created, the new apps, the new data connectors, the new dashboard, all the new flows, all those things it can detect for you and give you a list of them. And then you can do something, as we say here in our technical jargon, do something governance-y with it. Right? Different organizations go different levels of their governance here. In some organizations, they delete anything that got created if it wasn't created by a central service account. So they have a way where instead of creating it on their own, builders are supposed to request a new app or a new flow to do those things in. And then when those are provisioned after the request, it's done with a service account. Then they just delete everything else. It allows them a way to track what's being created in their environment. some people go a little softer than that. You know, if new things get created, they'll look and see who the author was of these things and then compare it. Maybe they have a champions team, you know, with channels in it where they offer tips and training and events and recognition and things like that. And they want to make sure if somebody is creating it for the first time that they get invited into that team to do it. So there's lots of things you could do, various levels of strictness in your governance here, depending on what you're looking to do, how much control you want to put in place. Hi, Asif. Welcome. Saw your note in the chat. We can.
Can you see me also?
Yeah, absolutely. Booth looks good.
Shane is here with me on the call.
Hi, Shane. Welcome.
And he also got Pam right here.
Yeah.
Hello, hello.
Great.
All right.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Everybody who's over there. I'm not sure how you can flip this over here. Okay, I'm just going to do it like that. Here we go. Here's the conference for folks who are feeling like they're missing out on the conference. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Eric.
Nice to see.
If you wanted to continue.
No, it's okay. It's good. It's nice to see conferences happening again in person. Right? There was a long break for many of us. So thanks for joining. We were talking about some of the early things in our top 10 list about governance. This particular topic that we have on screen at the moment is one that I've seen happen a lot at organizations. Is this something you've seen? Do you think this is a good idea or a bad idea to control the creation of new flows and apps and dashboards?
You know, we do have Mr. Power 911 with us over here. Maybe he can shed some light on it too.
I am very I'm very anti controlling anything, right? I do not like gatekeepers in the governance conversations, for being honest. You know, I'm a believer in Microsoft's original vision for Power Platform, that it is a very viral type of thing. You know, from a governance perspective, I am all about watching, right? So monitoring, using tools to watch what's happening with the Power Platform in your environment. But for better or for worse, I am not a fan of gatekeeping here. So sorry.
No, I think that's a good thing, and that's the point of us bringing them up, is to talk about the pros and the cons of these. I tend to lean more that direction myself on things. I think it's better to let people use the tools, but to track it and to provide some boundaries, some guidelines of things. And I've seen this particular slide. I've seen it done well, where it just creates a mechanism for tracking, you know, what's out there in the environment, and I've seen it go badly where it does exert too much control.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, right? It's the Power Platform has a lot of opportunities, right? There's a lot of things that scare traditional IT, right? And I was traditional IT for many years. I hung up that hat, and now I'm anti-traditional IT. Not anti, but I'm not traditional IT anymore. But you know, one of the big things when I talk to like large customers, you know, like one of my friends works at one of the world's largest banks, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, you know, the Power Platform will let me." Somebody could write a flow that would tweet out all of our secrets from our SharePoint list. And I'm like, look, that's not on Flow. In reality, your people already have access to do that. Flow does not let you do anything you don't have access to do during the day. Somebody could open up your SharePoint list. They could open up Twitter in another browser, copy, paste. You know, Flow makes that faster, but Flow is not circumventing your security. So I think that's an important lesson for IT to think about, you know, as we try to put guardrails on. You should have guardrails. I'm 100% for that. But at the end of the day, the Power Platform is not as scary and as evil as a lot of people want to start it out as. So the same way that we don't govern how people build things in Excel, why would we govern how someone builds a Power App for them or them and their coworkers? You know, they want to build a big corporate-wide Power App that's going to use a bunch of data and talk to 100,000 employees. Yeah, let's put that through a traditional process. You want to build an app so me and Asif can just, you know, hang out and have Super Bowl squares. Why does IT need to be involved in that? Why does IT want to govern that? Why do you want to gatekeep that? Let's just let me and Asif, you know, gamble on the Super Bowl and call it a day.
Yep, good point. Good point. Yeah, we had a good point from our
So,
attendees too. Someone mentioned that the
slightly
friction
different
that you
take on that.
introduce.
I
Oh,
definitely
go ahead, Pam.
agree that, yeah, I totally agree that like everybody should be able to create them. But what we've done is we've turned off sharing. So people can create things for themselves, and it kind of limits the growth. You know, we've got 8,000 employees or something. So when you have such a big environment and so many silos where people potentially could go off, build out whole things that, you know, and share them with the entire organization, and maybe we don't know about it, or, you know, we're not prepared to take it on to the make release. So, however, all they have to do is let us know. We can move it to another environment and we can share it. So it's just a way of making sure that IT is a part of that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
So they can build, they just can't share it without contacting us.
That's an interesting one. That's not one I've come across before, but I see the logic. Makes sense. A couple of comments from our chat here as well. They're talking about, you know, you add too much friction in the governance process. Again, shadow IT, right? People find a way to work around you, right? I think we've all been on both sides of that conversation before, right? But yeah, somebody else did. Well, Jason mentioned there's some large organizations that put some guardrails in place. This one that we're talking about here is somewhere in the middle of that, you know, detecting new items and doing something with them afterwards. Can be good, it can be bad. There's a lot of flexibility there in how much control you offer in something like that. I really like the idea of adding people to a champions community. If it's their first time creating something, add them somewhere automatically so they have a way to understand what's happening in the environment and know better. All right, let's move to another one. Yeah. This is one I am less fond of. The idea of this next one that I've seen in organizations is to prevent the casual use of these things, right? It hides the integrate button out of your SharePoint lists and libraries. There are a number of ways to accomplish this: PowerShell, custom actions, things like that to get it done. You can Google hiding ribbon buttons if you want to do that. But I've seen this used okay, and the idea is in this scenario, usually the organization does not lock it down by going to Power Apps. Someone that goes there deliberately to build something, they're more likely to have a better idea of what the rules and the guidance and best practices are, but they hide the casual SharePoint user from finding them. What do you think? I think I know what Shane's idea here will be. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Boo! That's all I have to say on that.
Yeah, I'm not as fond of this one personally.
Yeah, I definitely don't. I wouldn't want to do.
Yeah, there are some things that it's difficult to do without that, and I think it's difficult for us on the IT side or on the admin side or the security side. It's difficult for us to predict what the user is going to need to do. You put too many guardrails in place, you really do create some problems. But this is a common one I've seen happen in the real world. Number 5, governance messages in context. So the example here is, don't use this one. This is related to that detecting new items, right? Somebody goes and creates it on their own and it's going to get deleted by an automation process somewhere. If you're going to do things like that, any kind of thing you're going to put that limits something, communicate, right? Let your users know. If you have a need for some guardrails, communicate those in a place where they're going to know them. In a 127-page PDF somewhere on a SharePoint site is not good enough. You need to provide answers to people where they're trying to use the tools so that you can guide them. And usually I would say don't just smack their hands, help them find the way that they are supposed to do something. This is one that I know one of our attendees does. Yeah. Okay, best practices. So let's move on to our builders. Let's leave our platform owners and talk to the other audience a little bit here. So this is one that in Power Automate is sometimes a big challenge. If you've done much work in Power Automate, I know a lot of our people on our call, our panelists have done that. You know, it's sometimes difficult to figure out why something's going wrong, right? In the old days with SharePoint Designer, you had that workflow status column where you could go in and you could see everything that happened in it, all the history and all the events. That's harder to do now in Power Automate. So what can you do to help yourself? This article that we're linking to over here on the right, we're not affiliated with them in any way, but it's a nice article about how you can use this. You have any thoughts on this one? Thumbs up or thumbs down or background on this one, Shane? This is right in your wheelhouse. Right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this is solid advice, right? It's a lot of us, if you came from that SharePoint background, you're used to, like you said, the SharePoint history workflow history list and all that. You just have to build that into your own flow today. And so, it's not hard. It's just something you have to think through. I would say, I think overall, keeping an eye as you get lots of flows and such on what's going on, what's broken, what's not broken. Honestly, it's probably harder than it should be. But hopefully the owner of the workflows, they are, whatever their mechanism, they get the emails, they can go look at the reports, they could create the logging history. I think it's up to those owners to make sure they're thinking about this. I don't have a great answer here.
Sure. It's not a one size fits all thing, that's for sure.
So what I've been doing is, I created a flow that basically it goes in and it gets all the workflow information. And, from there you can pull out the environment, the workflow instance, and just created a link for that. And then I add that to my SharePoint list as the final step. I update a field that just has a link to the flow. So that way, if there's a question, and this works with SharePoint primarily, but if you have a Power Automate that you're using with, Power Automate with SharePoint, you can update that list item that you're running it on with the link directly to the flow. So if there's a question or problem and you need to go back and track it, especially if it's like a high traffic flow, that works out nice. By creating that, I put it in a flow, I put it all in a scope. So as long as I'm in the same environment, I can copy that whole scope that gets the workflow instance and adds it, just builds that URL. And I can just copy that and add it to all my future flows. So
yep, that's a great one.
Yeah, it's made things so much easier. Another thing, and I don't know if it's new or I just noticed it, but in tracking down flows, on the flow page where you have the list of flows that have run, you can edit the columns there. And I have spent so much time clicking through things, trying to find a specific flow before I started just adding a link back to the SharePoint item. But you can edit the columns, and that way you can see exactly who started a flow, or you can see the title or the ID. That was I just stumbled on that. I don't know how I missed it, but if someone definitely click on the edit column in that list of flows.
Good advice. Good advice.
Yeah,
Good advice. Yeah, that idea of a log column or some way to link the two together helps immensely. Saves a lot of time of that clicking back and forth through the history, trying to figure out exactly which instance is the one that this ran in. This idea of run after is nice too. If you are having problems, you can add an extra step after part of your flow, right? And tell it to only run if the previous step failed. You can group your steps together in a scope so that you can try to identify what's happening, jump in the middle of it. Good technique. All right, let's move to another one. Inline help and walkthroughs in your apps and dashboards. Of course, this is related to something we were talking about in our product announcements, but don't assume your users understood what you meant. It's the idea here. It's how many times have you jumped into a Power App or a form customized or something that someone else designed and have to look at it for 2 or 3 minutes to figure out where am I supposed to go. Right? I know I've done that. I'm sure other people have done that on my apps too, right? It always makes sense to you when you're building it, right? But that little bit of help can go a long way. We do have an example just to show you what I mean here. This is a template Power App that comes with, it's just one of the templates Microsoft provides. But as you're working in here, it's, you can add things like here, a priority. Of course, everybody's issue is high, right? But you can add a little help icon that tells people what do these mean? What's the criteria for picking one? maps to something else. Those things in the categories, acronyms, all those. Hover tips are a nice thing to do. Like this one, it's not obvious that's how you save. That's just the way they made the template. So watch for those kind of things. Offer help to your users while they're working. We have somebody on our call, one of our customers, that built a really fancy Power App for, it was a Teams review. You may have seen it in the previous episode. But before we had this ability in our tool, they were hardwiring a bunch of this into the app. Useful, but it's a lot easier now using VisualSP. Number 4, keep your UI simple and consistent. This ought to be a familiar link here to Shane, right? It's one of his YouTube videos. But some of these were some of his things that he was talking about there. Anything you'd like to highlight on this topic?
No, I mean, you're exactly right. Keep it simple. I like to call that the Hulk smash mentality, right? Your app shouldn't be a Bandersnatch movie. It shouldn't have to pick your path along the way. You know, if you want a timesheet app, make a simple timesheet app. You open up, you enter your time, you answer some questions, you're done. If you want to manage that timesheet in an app, do that in another app, right? That is then focused around managing it. And you want another app for approving it? Great. Try to make your app singularly focused, because the more focused your apps are, the more focused you're on your audience, the less confusion, the less likely they are to get lost, the better experience you build. If your app does 75 things, you're basically just setting yourself up for everyone to hate your app, because it's a lot like the government, right? You then have to pander to the lowest common denominator, and no one likes that. So be simple, be purposeful in what you build.
Point. Good point.
What did you think about the, let's see, what was it? There's the new creator kit. It's got a bunch of UI tools. Have you used that? Any thoughts on that?
Oh man, so Pam's calling me out. No, I have not used the creator kit yet. It is on the list of things that Shane needs to go poke around and learn about, but I have not gotten there. And I think a little bit it's lower on my list because it's not part of the product, right? And like for example, we all know themes are really hard with Power Apps, right? Like you can't really do theming. So then the COE toolkit did the theming, but it's kind of in this separate side thing that doesn't integrate well. So I just never talk about it, because I think that's really awkward to people that like, here, use this thing. Oh yeah, by the way, it's a pain in the butt. So I'm afraid the creator kit is that, but you've looked at it. Is it better than?
I caught a session, and I mean, it's got some really nice controls and things like that. So, but you make some really good points there.
They didn't hear words you just said.
It actually did come through.
I did those. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, never mind. Well, good. Well, so there you go. So see, Pam catching me and then showing that she's smarter than me. So good job, Pam.
Yeah, lots of good stuff there. And whether you're using, I haven't tried the creator kit yet myself either. But the idea of having some consistency, I think, is an important one too. You're going to, especially if you're designing multiple. Mm-hmm.
No, I was thinking.
Oh, go ahead.
You know.
Hey, this is. Are you there?
Oh, go, sorry. What is that?
So just a question. If anyone, I'm wondering if anyone has any perspective on the idea of maybe making it partly at least the responsibility of the IT or whoever's the people who are governing Power Apps development across an organization to sort of identify cases where perhaps they get too ambitious and did out too much and send it to part before they're sort of letting it out into the wild and letting an app be used. Yeah.
Your audio is breaking up, Jason. Yeah, sorry, Jason, your audio is breaking up. I think if I heard.
Sorry, yeah, I'm having a problem. Okay.
That's okay. Let me repeat it back. I think I got enough of it to get the idea. You're asking, is it good for us to have IT involved? Was it in when people create apps and in sharing them out and using them? I don't know if approvals was too strong of a word, but some kind of a process for making sure user follows. Is that what you're asking?
So that they're ensuring that their UI is consistent, are putting too much into a single.
For UI consistency and things like that. Yeah, some organizations have a branding team or a UI user experience team that does this in a lot of web properties.
Yeah, what I think the UI consistency, that's a great one, right? So slightly different than the creator kit that I don't know anything about, is the idea of components and component libraries. So in my classes, I definitely teach people that, yes, you should be making components, not for everything, people want to overdo it, but a consistent header, footer component that's kind of pre-built, that is configurable enough and flexible enough to fit all scenarios. And so to Jason's question, I think that is kind of the first level of that for me, is if we can get a consistent header, footer, so that all of our apps have a similar feel, I think that is a giant step forward for everyone and probably solves 90% of the world's challenges. And that thankfully is baked in the product. So Shane has learned about that one.
Yeah, good point. Good point. I found that a lot of times that idea of having a Power Platform Champions community or Power User community or something can really help with that. You can share, things that are being done or templates that you might want people to start with for UI type things, whether it's those components and component libraries or just patterns you want people to follow. Some way of encouraging consistency across them. And using principles instead of rules, I think, is an important one in those types of environments. Keeping an eye on the clock. Oh, go ahead, somebody. Asif, was that you?
Well, I was just going to throw it in there that, we, of course, grew up in the whole SharePoint forms and Power InfoPath and everything else days. And at the end of the day, it's, of course, the vendor who has to make things simple. Then it's the creator who has to make things simple. But you cannot take the human aspect out of all this stuff. So keeping your UI simple and consistent is a dream, which I hate to say, but I don't think it's going to completely come true ever. It will get closer and closer and closer, but many times you'll still need the right kind of guidance on top of it to help users. Microsoft actually is very good at saying that all of their products are super intuitive. A smile on my face when I say that.
And robust.
Because I've had these conversations, with Microsoft many times, like, yes, they are simpler than many other things that I've tried outside in terms of SAP, IBM, and everything else. Absolutely. Having said that, you have to look at things from the user perspective. Just because you build it, they will not come. That's not how it works. You look at the popularity of Craigslist, and you look at the unpopularity of many modern-looking, wonderful, amazing-looking intranets that just don't give the exact information and consistency that you need to help you along to what you needed. And that's just the reality. That's how it is. So for situations like that, obviously, you do need, something like VisualSP or something to help the users. But anyway, at the bottom line, we should definitely look to make things simple, consistent, smaller, much more direct. We live in the TikTok world. The attention span is very, very small these days for everybody. And we need to keep that in mind for sure.
Nice point. Yeah, a lot of times in these no-code, low-code platforms, there are trade-offs you're making, right? There are sacrifices because of a limitation in place somewhere. So if you were writing this in code, you would do it this way. You can't, so you make a compromise to do it this way in the low-code, no-code tool. Many times those places do cause that friction, a little extra complexity. Good to offer help in those spots. You can probably predict a fair amount of those when you're building the app. Consistency helps. People get used to it, even if it's maybe not the easiest way to do it, if it's consistent in all the apps in the organization, or many of the apps anyway. It helps. Okay, number 5, steer the user towards success. So some of these, again, we've got some links to videos that Shane's put out there on YouTube. The idea of validating your data and hiding and disabling things that aren't relevant to the person that's using the form. Rather than have them try to use something that won't work for them, or that won't be able to, will throw an error when they try to write to the list or something. Steer people toward it. Make the form as simple as you can. Lots of good things in these videos. Anything else you want to share, Shane?
No, I think it's just a repeat of the same what we talked about earlier, right? The Hulk smash mentality. You're trying to force the user to make as few decisions as possible. And so if you can hide all the buttons that they can't click, great. Better yet, can you build the app so the buttons aren't even there and have those buttons be in another app that people do? Even easier for you. But yeah, Hulk smash. Don't make people think. They're not very smart. Or well, I'm not anyway. So.
Yep, good perspective. These will really make a difference. And I've been in organizations where there was very tight governance around Power Platform things, almost to where it was difficult to use. And the more you apply some structure and some discipline to yourself as a builder, the better case you can make to let you do things, to open those things up. So good idea for you to think through these things, to follow some discipline and some paths to do this, some of these best practices we're talking about. So lots of good links. After our roundtable, as normal, we'll send it out. We'll send out a link for these. It'll be in our YouTube channel. Feel free to take a look and use these QR codes, look up these resources. Any other favorite things you like to steer people to, resources to look at? Opportunity for a shameless plug.
PowerApps911.com, the world's greatest training and consulting company, right? But no, I think it's important just to remember that there's so much out there, right? There's so much community stuff available. There's podcasts, there's YouTube, there's blogs. If you want to learn, it's out there, and so do it. Go build something awesome. That's my advice.
Good advice it is. It's definitely one of those things you learn by doing, and you got to do it, right? Yeah. What is going on at the conference? Anything you'd like to highlight for us that's going on there on site? Things that are being announced or talked about, or trends you're seeing? Anything exciting?
Lots of hugs. Lots of actually realizing that people are people has been my favorite part of all this. So
I want to put you on. What's the word here? Anyway, I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
The co-authoring in Power Apps. What do you think about that?
I don't have an opinion yet because it doesn't exist yet, right? The fact that I can't use it, they announced PowerFX as a formula language that's going to be used across the platform 2 years ago, and nothing's changed in 2 years. So I'm not overthinking the co-authoring. I do think overall the co-authoring it's a hard concept because so many apps are so agile, and they are, it's usually one person with an idea. So how the heck do you have two people with an idea and not have them step on each other?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Co-authoring is not a feature I've clamored for. This is where I think they get themselves in trouble, honestly. So I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, but as Power Platform started as something that a bunch of excited people used, whether they're in IT or not. As it's grown, IT's gotten more involved. Pro developers have gotten involved, and so now the pro developers are like, well, your platform would be cool if it did all this ALM crap. Or your platform would only be real if it did blah blah blah. And they keep adding all of this stuff to make those pro devs happier with the Power Platform. And I don't know why. No offense to pro devs. I mean, I love pro devs too, but why do we keep adding all this stuff to make it harder to, so we can go through a proper life cycle? Power Apps is at its best when it's an agile tool that's being used by the people that understand the business problem to build their thing.
I was thinking the same thing. I'm not sure how many people are asking for co-authoring in Power Apps. Maybe I'm missing something, but it's not like a Word document. It's so much more complicated. And if you're doing something and I do something different, and we're in the same exact form, that's screwing each other's process. Not sure if it's, but we're probably both going to get in trouble now with Microsoft.
Yeah, you're right there. So hi, Microsoft. But I don't get it. Honestly, I don't get it. And I mean, it's even more complicated. So you can say, okay, well, we'll lock you the form so only one person can mess the form up at a time. But what about when you get into like collections or patching, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? I could go add a column to a collection, and that's going to blow up what you're doing with the
Yep.
collection. God help you trying to figure out how to find that where those bugs started coming from, right? That is borderline impossible when you corrupt a collection to figure out why your app, right? Because the app just throws errors everywhere. Because the app's like, this collection's bad.
Yep.
It can't say, this is the bad piece of the collection code. It just says the collection's broken everywhere. Good luck.
Good point.
So, yeah, they're going to be real angry with me. I hope they're not watching.
It does seem kind of counterintuitive. Like on the one hand, like keeping apps small really does make sense. And then if you're building something so big that you have multiple people working on it,
Yeah.
that's going to get complicated.
See, even Pam agrees, and she didn't make fun of me that time, so we're doing great.
Didn't make fun of you anytime.
I'm just teasing Pam. Picking on Pam because I'm a mean person.
Aside from that, what other item that Microsoft has announced last couple of days that you guys found to be exciting, useful for the community?
So I'm personally really excited about the SAP connector. If you haven't connected the SAP data before, it's just a nightmare. Very excited to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I don't know if I.
No?
No, I don't know. Was there one that
Well,
got you excited?
One thing that I appreciated about the conference as a whole is, you and I have been to these conferences many times for many, many, many years, right, Shane? Pam, you've been as well. And a lot of the times we see the same kind of speakers coming to this conference. And this time around is the Microsoft 365 SharePoint team speakers, as well as a lot of dynamic speakers also coming in. And this community is expanding in a way where exactly Microsoft is headed. Collaborative applications, business applications, all coming together in terms of integrations, technology-wise, as well as people as well. I really like that overall aspect of it. Communities coming together. So not a technical specific thing, but I think the whole roadmap of what's going on. Really enjoying seeing it.
One thing they did yesterday that I really liked is they did small sessions. So I caught a ton of small sessions. It really helped me figure out what I wanted to focus on today and some of the deeper sessions. So I hope they do that.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to attend any of the 25-minute sessions, but it was a neat concept for sure. So
It makes a lot of sense for day one.
I don't want to do it like the whole thing, but for day one, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been, I don't know if everybody knows, it's about 4,000 people altogether, including speakers and vendors and everybody else, which is far more than the initial count that was going to be at this conference. So a lot of good stuff going on, a lot of different length of sessions. So many, many keynotes, 25-minute sessions, 1-hour sessions, and it's like a good variety of education at the conference. Good stuff.
Well, great. Thanks everyone for joining, bringing a little bit of the conference to us. Good topic here for us.